welcome to day 9 of my 3D asset tutorials. I want to first of all apologise for not doing any tutorials for yesterday. I received some unforeseen circumstances that make it such I couldn't record. So I'm making up for today. Today's tutorial will be very productive and we'll learn quite a lot. Okay, if you start this tutorial from this point on, please refer to my website www.andrewbeer3d.com. In here has a bunch of my models right here where you can view what I make and all the stuff as examples. You can also view the beginnings of this tutorial series, and then for further continuation click on my tutorials page. And so far I'm up to day 8. I still up to update my video in 8 here. Okay, today, so let's start. Today we'll be discussing the basics of physically based rendering and importing in Substance Designer. Now, Substance Designer is a physically based program that textures your assets or models, even characters, anything that you import, and it's a more procedural based kind of texturing kind of program. Procedural kind of assets is a very useful thing to do in games design, especially if you've got tons of assets to texture in a scene, and it's easy just to create a certain substance procedural material which you can import into Games Engine, and then instead of keep importing that file into the Games Engine, even tweaking it a slight fraction, it automatically updates on both your Games Engine and in the Substance Designer. I always use this. I used to go into Photoshop and then paint my assets. I always used to use photo reference as well. All them I used to use, but I found that for what I mainly do my asset work, it could be done a lot quicker and efficiently using procedural based, and I was turning out much more high quality, which is what is needed. So first of all, you go to File, New Substance. Now here you have your name, so you call it your conventional name graph. This is your initial graph. You don't need to worry too much because you can add graphs afterwards, but it's always best to name first of all. So since we're working on the salt asset, we call this salt mat, short for material. Now, absolute or relevant to parent. This is depending on what mode you're doing it in the Games Engine. If you're making it like a dynamic kind of material which can be resized, you choose relative to parent. But since I'm doing absolute, you can specify what resolution you're working on. So I always work for 1024 for like small assets, and then 2048 for bigger assets. It's all to do with resolution. If you have a big asset, the texture density needs to be more increased on a big object than you are on a small object. So I always go with 1024. Again, relevant format relevant to parent. This is the actual bits, the bits per channel. I always do relevant to child. It depends on what you need. Most ones are 8-bit for grayscale and 16 for color. maybe, perhaps, but I always set it to relative to parent. It's all to do with the actual mapping. You know, if you're using an engine that is very fussy in that kind of aspect, always pick to relative to parent, because then it will always be useful. Now we have this kind of window. This window here is templates. These are preset file formats. Each one has a different particular workflows based on what you need, and the outputs is different to each one depending on what you need. I mostly use either 3 of these. If I'm making like a mask, I just create an empty one and add it as a mask, because you can add outputs afterwards, and if you use an ambient occlusion, you'll need to do that because none of these presets include ambient occlusion. So it's always best to know this kind of stuff, really. Now, you have physically based rendering for metallic and roughness, physically based rendering for specular and glossiness, and standard. If you're using standard, if you're used to the diffuse, normal and specularity, use that. It can do that procedurally as well, but then you've also got physically based rendering. If you're new to physically based rendering, I would recommend going to Monoset Toolbag 2. It has like a little write-up about what physically based rendering is all about. Off the back, it's all about subsurface. So it's to do with energy conversion, you know, how the object is on the subsurface. You know, if you're having like a glass, it's smooth, which means the light rays won't bounce off so much, so it will be a complete reflective, because there's nothing to break it up. It's completely, you know, flat. And then same with metals. It uses a Fresnel kind of philosophy. So in other words, in the center it's dead center to you, but as you go to the edge, it's more deformed and calculation to the actual object, if that makes sense. And it also deals with microsurfacing as well. So if you have something that's rough like a rock, obviously because a rock is more stony, it's more bumpy and more rougher, the light will bounce off, diffuse in it as well. It's to do with diffuse and color map, and it's all to do with light rays basically. It's like a more scientific kind of way of calculating passes to rendering the asset. So I would recommend looking into the site. There's the actual site, www.monoset.co/toolbag/learn to physically based theory. It has a bunch of stuff. Now, I will say there's 2 different workflows. You have metallic and roughness workflow. That one deals with you have a metallic texture, which deals with how metal your object is. So if you like having a pure metal based object, it's going to be pure white. Where if you're dealing with a non-metal, it's going to be black. And if you've got something that's painted over metal, it'll be more of a greyish colour, depending on what kind of object you're creating. And there's a roughness texture. This roughness texture is it defines on how much of a Fresnel and how much it's smooth and rough. Pure black means it's roughness. Pure white is rough. The more black the object, the output is, the more glossy it becomes, and more, you know, more reflective it gets. and then you have the specularity and glossiness. Now don't confuse yourself with this, the standard specularity and diffuse. This is a different kind of workflow. This uses the estimation of specularity, how much it's, it shines. Where this is a physically based version, so it does have a diffuse and a specularity. But the difference is, the diffuse is for the color, but the specularity defines what color the reflectiveness is and how much it is reflective, in terms of specularity. And the glossiness is a bit like the roughness, so that defines on how smooth the object is and how much its glossiness. The more, obviously, it's in reverse, so the more black it is, the less glossy it becomes, and the more white it is, the more glossiness it becomes. So this is more to do, it's kind of like the metallic kind of texture. So it depends on what your workflow you prefer to use, and I always prefer using metallic and roughness to do with Unreal Engine. Mostly compensate for that. It can do standard and specularity, but it works best with metallic and roughness kind of maps. So you click that one and click OK, and it automatically creates a route here. It automatically creates like a root file here. Just save it, save as, and I call this salt substance. Now I always put my substance file in the actual Maya folder, so I can always easily locate it. So always locate your file folder. So salt dispenser, and I always create a new folder here, and call it substance. This is so you can always easily access and locate your files when you're in the Games Engine, which is useful. Now, I will stress this out. You must save this file first before, because if you don't, this won't get saved. So you must save the actual substance file. Now, this next bit is talking about setting up the actual substance file, based on my workflow. It does take a little pain to set up every time, but it's always best to do it that way. Now, from here, I right click and I create new folder. Rename that folder graphs, and I just click and drag it into my graph into the graphs folder. You might be asking yourself, okay, what are graphs? Well, graphs are the actual building blocks of how to create the texture. This is what you get. This is the graph folder. Let me reset the actual view. So Windows reset view. If you give it a second, we yes it. Normally I have this in a separate window. I have a second screen, so it's for me useful to take this out and put it on my second screen, because then I can look at the graph and the object. This is be bigger. Since I haven't got that, what do? I just see, you can just take Windows out by clicking that. I reduce this. And then just, it's all to do with how you like it's all to do with personal preference, you know, how you like to view your actual working folder, your file, you know, a bit like Photoshop. You can change stuff around depending on how you like it. It takes a bit of a fiddle to work out what's best for your workflow and stuff like that. See, this window here, base color. If you click on any of these tabs, it will bring up the actual bitmap of the file. I always have it small. You can change the size of it at will, so if you need it to be bigger, you can. For my screen size, what I have here, I say that is good enough for me. Now I create another folder. This time I will rename it bitmaps. So if I have any bitmaps I like to import, I'll put it in there. I won't be importing any of the bitmaps today. It'll take some time, and since we run near to the end of the tutorial anyway, it'll be best to do it for tomorrow's tutorial. Next thing I like to do, I like to change the background. This background here are landscape, environment, imaging. It uses 360 degree on all directions, so it's like an atmosphere kind of sphere. This landscape alters it depending on alters the lighting depending on the actual image. As you can see, if you change it to this green file here, it's changed the object more greeny. You can just swap and change it depending on what you want it to look like, the lighting. Bearing in mind, no matter what graph you create or what asset you actually texturing, it will always look very good in every lighting. If your actual texturing is correct in physically based rendering correctness, then it will look good no matter what lighting you have. I always alter it depending on what object I do it. I like to use, I think I've got it imported, my road in Tenerife Mountain. That is a pretty good lighting. Again, it's down to personal preference, but I find that having the background enabled kind of distracts me, so I like to turn it off. So go environment, edit, and it's visible, you turn it off, and that's what you're left with. It's just the object, which is more better. It's not so distracting, and you can comfortably alter the actual texturing on this system. Now I'm going to import the actual asset, so I then create another folder, rename models, and then in my models folder I'll import, link my 3D mesh which I'll locate. Right here, which is the FBX folder. I just select and click and drag, and all the assets are imported. Now I think I'll leave my tutorial here, so please join me again tomorrow where we'll be texturing this, and always remember to save all your folders and your files. Thank you for today.